Hello, everyone. I'm Randy Arrington, and welcome to the 20th episode of Page Valley Living. We're here today inside the Luray Fire Hall, where these engines currently sit silent. But on a windy Wednesday, back on March 20th, these engines were driven by volunteers into the lines of wildfires spread all across the central Page Valley. We'll be talking with Tim Lansberry, who remembers those stressful days as both a member of the Page County Sheriff's Office, who helped evacuate communities ahead of the flames, as well as a volunteer firefighter on the front lines of quickly spreading wildfires in multiple locations. We'll talk about these things that he saw during those anxious moments in late March and what was learned through the experience. We'll talk about all that and more in just a moment, but first, let's check out this week's headlines. And now looking back at the week that was in the Page Valley. On Monday night, the Luray Council agreed that there will be no increases to real estate or personal property taxes in the next budget cycle. The council is, however, considering increases to the meals tax and the lodging tax. The overall budget for Luray will decrease in FY25 as a result of the end of federal ARPA funds. The average price of a Page County home sold in the first quarter of 2024 was just over $336,000. That represents a nearly 22% increase over the first quarter of 2023. Last year, the average sale price stood at just over $276,000. Fewer homes were sold in the first 3 months of 2024, and on average, they stayed on the market 28 days longer. However, the number of homes sold over $250,000 increased by 48%. On the heels of news about higher home values, the Page County Board of Supervisors last week chose Cowan Appraisal to conduct the county's next reassessment. The process of assessing nearly 22,000 parcels in Page County will begin on July 1st and run through late 2025. The new assessed values will go into effect on January 1st, 2026. And finally, in our news, the town of Stanley is mourning the Sunday passing of Dwayne Lehman, a longtime councilman and volunteer with the fire department and rescue squad. Lehman had spent the last 2 weeks in the Winchester Medical Center after suffering a heart attack in his home. Prior to arriving in Stanley, Lehman spent 15 years as a police officer in Harrisonburg. His funeral service will be held at 11 a.m. on Friday, April 12th at the Bradley Funeral Home in Luray. In the world of sports, the Page County High School baseball and softball teams lead the Bull Run District with a perfect 3-0 mark in district play. Softball next plays at home on April 17th when they host Mountain View. The baseball team hosts the Generals this Friday, April 12th. The Luray girls soccer team is 4-1 overall, yet they sit in fourth place of a competitive Bull Run district. The Bulldogs' only loss was to Madison on March 28th. They host Strasburg on Thursday. The Luray baseball team fell to 2-4 on the season after a 9-3 loss to Rappahannock on Friday. The baseball team also hosts Strasburg on Thursday. Looking at the weekend ahead in the Page Valley on Saturday, April 13th, early in the morning, about 7 o'clock, you can go down to the Hawksbill Creek and along the Luray Hawksbill Greenway for the Youth Trout Derby. That's from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. There are going to be prizes, trophies, food vendors, exhibits, and goodies bags at the check-in. The event will be held rain or shine and is open to kids 15 and under. It is on the Route 340 park and ride along the Greenway. That's the area of the creek where they're going to have the Trout Derby. At 2 p.m., you can go down to Shenandoah and meet the author with Arthur Warren Pence. He'll be at the Shenandoah Museum and Visitor Center. And finally, 8:30 on Saturday night, it's movie night at the Stanley Little League Field. They're going to be showing The Sandlot. And the movie starts at 8:30, concessions by the Stanley Little League. And that's the headlines from the past week in the Page Valley. Episode 20 of Page Valley Living is being recorded on Tuesday, April the 9th, and will air on Wednesday, April the 10th. And we're here inside of the Luray Fire Hall, and we're back with Tim Lansberry again. And Tim, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Randy.
For those that don't know you, let's introduce them to the old boy here a little bit. You've been you're the head of investigations for the Page County Sheriff's Office, right?
Yes.
And is that the correct title?
I'm a captain.
Captain, okay. And how long have you been with the Sheriff's Office?
Since 2010.
2010. How long have you been head of investigations?
Since 2020.
2020. Okay. And how long you been a volunteer firefighter here in Luray?
2002.
2002. And you've held some offices within the fire department?
Yes, I've been. I'm currently the treasurer for the department. I've been the secretary. I've been the vice president and the president.
Okay, done a little bit of all of it.
A little bit of all of it.
And I believe you played a little six string with a band called Blue Ridge Thunder.
I do play bluegrass. I've been with the band since about 2019.
2019, you're doing a little bit of all of it, and an avid outdoorsman as well. I think your boy got a nice spring gobbler, didn't he?
He did. He's more the outdoorsman than I am, but he enjoys it. So that's
Didn't that thing have like a 9-inch beard or something?
They had a 9-inch beard and 3/4-inch spurs. So
17, 18 pounds. That's a
Yep,
good one. That's a good Tom ever to get to be his first one. Well, one thing, you play so many different roles, and that's why we wanted you to be here today. We are going to talk about the recent wildfires that happened in the Page Valley in late March, and you had several different roles in that, and that's why we wanted you to be here today. By this time, most everyone knows the story of the wildfires that swept through across Virginia and across the central Page Valley and across the region, really, on Wednesday, March the 20th. It scorched thousands of acres in Virginia and just thousands of acres locally as well, and there were fires over in Hardy County, West Virginia, and all across the region. Now we're going to try a little something different today. You inspired me several weeks ago to write an editorial during the coverage of the wildfires, and you wrote an inspiring post on Facebook on Sunday, March the 24th, 4 days into the wildfires, maybe about the point where you guys we'd had some rain, I think, Friday night, and you were starting to get over the hump a little bit. And by this point, you had seen and experienced a lot, both as we said, a member of the sheriff's office and as a volunteer firefighter. So we want to go through your Facebook post, paragraph by paragraph, and just talk about what you saw and heard and felt during those days when everyone in the region was really on the edge of their seats, and they were nervous and they were scared. Does that sound like something we can do? Okay, all right. A home once stood here. It was the first call I responded to on Wednesday around 1:30 p.m. We spent about 30 minutes trying to keep the fire at bay, but we quickly realized that Mother Nature was driving, and we were just along for the ride. The roar of the fire advancing up the mountain toward us is a sound that I'll never forget, and one that I'd liken to the sound of a freight train. It was all we could do to get those hose lines off the ground and back on the truck before the worst happened. Had you ever heard that sound before?
Not like that.
And can you be even more descriptive? Was it just...
It was just a loud rush. It was a mix between the wind and the fire actually consuming things like mountain laurel, brush, underbrush, heavy leaf litter. And it was just a huge roaring sound just advancing up the mountain, and you could just hear it coming.
How quick was the line moving? I mean, particularly Wednesday when it started and those winds were whipping.
When we first got to that particular call, it was about 1.25 acres to 1.5 acres involved, and it was mainly in the power line right away off of Cattail Lane. And there was a couple of guys there with us that took off with rakes and blowers and tried to get a line around the head of the fire, and it just kept jumping the line. And Lieutenant at that point told us, go ahead and go up to the house and try to protect the house. So it was 3 of us up there at the house, a tanker and an engine, 3 guys. And the fire was jumping so far ahead of itself that it would just move past us to the point where there was no catching it. And at that point, we were just doing structure protection and trying our best to keep the fire off of the house.
I'm going to go to your next section here. We were able to evacuate back down the mountain to a safer spot, but could hear the fire consuming everything that we had left behind. The resident and her animals made it out safely, looking someone in the face and trying to explain the urgency and that they only have minutes to get out is not an easy conversation to have. How many homes do you think you evacuated that day?
Personally, I only did that one because once we were committed to that scene, that was it.
Okay,
I was on the engine. I had actually left work. I heard all these calls starting to drum up, and I told my guys at the sheriff's office, hey, I'm going to go and see if they need help at the firehouse. So I left work, came here, jumped on an engine, and that's where I stayed for the next 24 hours. And
this is someone you knew. You don't have to name a name, but just someone you knew.
Yep.
What was their reaction? Were they in shock?
I think so. I think she knew the urgency there. She understood it. Didn't want to face it, obviously. It's a home of memories and things that are her personal possessions. All that stuff is there. And, having somebody tell her, hey, you need to get out, get what you can and get out, get your animals, get out. That's a hard conversation to swallow.
Yeah. How many, literally, were you giving them 5 minutes, 2 minutes?
They probably had 5 minutes from the time I told them until the time we actually left.
Wow. Wow. The feeling of helplessness and disappointment in ourselves was immediate as we drove back down the mountain away from a home. That was for someone was full of memories and all of their worldly possessions. It isn't supposed to happen like that. We're supposed to be able to show up, protect their home, and all is well in the end. It didn't happen that day. Rolling into houses of lifelong friends and watching them pack their cars with their possessions is heartbreaking. The atmospheric conditions were a catastrophic recipe for disaster. Fire behavior was erratic and unpredictable. There was more fires across the county being reported, and there were not fire trucks available. Not only in the county, but across the region. If you needed help from Shenandoah, Rockingham, everybody was dealing with the same thing. You had no backup.
They had nobody to send us. In fact, while we were on the way to that call, we got a call across the radio. The chief was in the officer's seat with me, and the engine I was driving. And we got a call from, I believe it was Warren County, asking if we had any trucks available that we could send them on the fire that they had. And he had to tell them no, because we were so inundated with calls at that point. We had nobody to send them. They had nobody to send us. We got word later in the afternoon that Henrico County was sending 3 trucks, and they were the closest that was available. And they're 3 hours away.
But you were on your own for quite a long time.
We were on our own for the first 12 hours at least. It was us.
And that was when the wind was the worst.
Yes.
You mentioned all those factors against you. We talked about the high winds that day, gust of 50 miles an hour, I believe, dry conditions, electrical lines going down, sparking fires here, there, everywhere. I mean, it was odds that no one could have matched, and yet you mentioned the fact that you felt guilt. Why is that?
Because you're the ones that's supposed to help. You're supposed to be equipped with the tools, the manpower, the equipment to be able to arrive at a situation like that and take care of it. And we couldn't that day. There was just too much against us. The wind, the weather conditions, the dry conditions of the mountain, the leaf litter. That area had not seen rain for some time. And just the winds in the days preceding that had dried out everything on top. And it was a perfect recipe for disaster.
It really was, and I don't think anyone holds anything but pride for the volunteers. No guilt necessary whatsoever. That didn't stop any of the volunteers that day. I can't put into words how lucky this county is to have the volunteer fire and rescue folks that we have. So many of them spent hours and hours on the front lines, walking up and down the sides of the mountains with rakes, leaf blowers, chainsaws, all in tow. Some stood on porches, pushing leaves away from decks and the sides of houses to keep fire from burning them. They breathed so much smoke, have been windburned, sunburned, and little to no sleep, but they have never once thought about quitting. I can't tell you how proud I am of all these guys at Luray, Stanley, and Shenandoah Fire Departments, and how proud I am to be a small part of that brotherhood. It really is a brotherhood, isn't it?
Sure is. We can come together in an incident like this and absolutely get the job done. And we may not always agree on things outside of an incident like this, in meetings or whatever. But when it hits the fan is when it matters. And that day it mattered, and everybody did fantastic. The guys from Stanley, the guys from Shenandoah that came down here, they didn't have calls of their own going on the south end of the county in Shenandoah, so those guys spent a lot of time down here. Stanley had their own calls going on. In fact, that morning they had a structure fire. They lost the house. That kind of kicked everything off that day. And then they had a large outdoor fire through the afternoon and night that kept them pretty busy.
Head-on collision, I think, too.
They had a lot of stuff going on there, so they took care of their territory, and they sent us guys when they were available. And without those guys, without those other companies, we couldn't have done what we did.
And I want to remind everybody out there that they did this voluntarily, put themselves in danger, left their jobs, just we can't say enough about what our volunteers did. And you also recognized some other folks. So you said the ECC needs to be recognized as well. The dispatch center was overwhelmed, but they kicked tail. Danielle Reinhardt and her crew kept things running with an unbelievable amount of radio traffic. Thank you all. And they really did. I mean, because it was probably people reporting the different fires that were popping up and the smoke they were seeing, and then there was the accident. And I have no idea how many calls they got, but they were pretty busy, weren't they?
They were. I don't know how many calls they had, but they had to be just absolutely inundated, not only with phone calls, but the radio traffic. They were trying to hear people call them. People were walking on each other on the radio and trying to get their traffic out. And it just, I've sat in that seat. I was a dispatcher in Shenandoah County for a couple of years prior to my stint in law enforcement, and I know what that can be like. I know how hectic it can be. I know what a headache it can be, and they did an absolutely fantastic job.
Really consummate professionals all the way through. The sheriff's, you say next, the sheriff's office guys did a fantastic job going door to door, helping to evacuate residents. Some were raking leaves and manning hose lines. And one thing I want to note about the sheriff's office, this is something I dealt with early on, talked to the major about this, Stevie, a little bit. Sheriff's office was catching a little flack early on about communication, but what I think, 2 points I want to make, and you can comment as you'd like, or not comment at all, but I think number one, people don't realize that the sheriff's office was not the lead agency in the incident that was taking place. That's number one. Number two, everything was happening so fast in time that, like I was telling you before we started recording, even when we tried to do updates, multiple updates, we would hit publish and immediately get new information in, and things were changing constantly. So I really felt like that was very unfair. Criticism when you're talking about in the moment of a crisis. I think the sheriff's office was doing a lot more that people didn't realize, other than worrying about social media.
Yeah, absolutely. And all that took was a couple phone calls to say, hey, I need you to go here, and try to start evacuating some homes. And immediately you had 10, 12 deputies. The sheriff was calling people out to try to get more people, on the road. He upped the staff that night to try to help in any way he could. So there was things going on that a lot of people don't even know were happening.
As is always the case.
Always the case.
You go along and say, along with Seal's Septic Service, I'm so proud of everyone. I could ask for a better team. Kevin Seal, this is of Seal's Septic Service, brought his septic trucks out full of water to help protect structures with his sewer jet. He likely fought as much fire with those trucks as we did. Thanks so much, Kevin. There are really no words to adequately thank everyone in the community for their support the last couple of days, keeping in mind this was written on Sunday, the 4th day of the wildfires. From the monetary donations, foods, drinks, equipment, Tylenol, baby wipes, you name it, the outpouring of love and support has been incredible and very humbling. We don't do what we do for the accolades. We do it for the love of our community. This is our community, and we will defend it. There were so many different fundraisers, individual efforts, groups efforts, that we were even afraid to start listing them because there were so many. There were dozens happening, and they were all over social media. And I'm going to tell you what, in moments of tragedy, you can find some good. And the way this community stepped up, I think, was it touched my heart and made me just absolutely appreciate where I live.
It was unbelievable. People coming in here, dropping off food, groceries, medicine, the Tylenol, the baby wipes, money, gas cards, gift cards. It's been an unbelievable response, and I think it's been that way across the entire county, not just our department, but Stanley Fire Department, Shadow Fire Department. They've also received an amazing amount of donations and just love from the community, and that's what matters at the end of the day.
People came out of the woodwork.
Absolutely.
Man. It was amazing.
Absolutely.
If you are able, turn that same support to those who have lost in our community. Some will need more help than others. Some have lost everything. Please support them too. At last count, there were 10 houses that had been just flattened. I think 3 or 4 others that had some level of damage. We have not seen any names or particular addresses. Perhaps those folks don't want to be made public, but we do know that Page One has received some shipments of items for those families if they would like to reach out to Page One. I know there are other organizations. Red Cross was involved at one point, but there are multiple organizations out there for help if anyone needs that. You could even contact probably the ECC or the sheriff's office, and they can direct you in the right direction if you're still in need of help. Lastly, to those who, this is something I really want to talk about, because I was really glad when you put in this paragraph, because it's amazing how some people will react in moments of tragedy or crisis. Lastly, to those who like to post snarky comments about the way things were or weren't done during this incident, next time, instead of grabbing your phone to post on social media about how things weren't done to your liking, grab a shovel or a rake and come give us a hand. I thought that was well said, because from the sheriff's office to the park service to the forestry department, no one was spared. Boy, they were all under the criticism of everyone. Now, some people, landowners and all, were scared. They didn't know what to expect. They wanted information, and that is perfectly understandable. But then we had some bystanders who just wanted to throw the dart. Yeah. And what made you put that sentence in there?
You just get tired of it. You know, you're the ones out here on the line and running back and forth and trying to do the best you can. And then you start reading that stuff, and it just really gets under your skin. Whether it's directed to certain organizations or people or not, it doesn't matter. And it's not the time and the place for it.
Yeah, I agree totally. And then we get down here, we're getting towards the end. You kind of ended it this way. How we've managed to make it out of the last few days without any major injuries or even death is beyond me. I can only think of one reason, but God. Yep. We had hundreds of firefighters here between what was going on the east side and the west side, volunteers, homeowners in the path of fires, and to my knowledge, not even I don't know of a first-degree burn.
I don't know of any major injuries. I think there may have been some injuries like rolling an ankle or something. I'd heard somebody had done that. But
okay.
Outside of that, no major injuries that I know of or have heard about. So it's absolutely amazing.
Amazing was the word I was going to use. Absolutely amazing. Now that you've had some time to reflect on it, how did you feel on Saturday riding down Main Street with all those folks waving signs and cheering for you?
It was really nice. It was humbling. We certainly don't do it for that reason.
Sure.
But it was very humbling, very nice. We really appreciate it. And it was nice to see all that support come out and continue the support even after the fires are over.
Yeah. Between that support and the folks I saw lining the streets, and the folks who brought in Gatorade and water and gave money and offered equipment and time, and it was really touching. It's quite a community we live in, isn't it?
Definitely is. Definitely is.
It really is. Well, Tim, I want to thank you so much for being here with me today and reflecting on this. I know it probably wasn't all that easy, but I think it's important for people to hear about the good and the bad, and maybe even a little of the ugly that happened during those times. And I really do appreciate you being with us today, giving us some of your time, for everything that you have done for our community and everything you'll continue to do.
Thank you. The guys really appreciate it. Appreciate everybody's support. Speaking for Luray, we can't thank you enough.
Yeah. Well, thanks again to you, and thanks to all of the first responders, firefighters from all across the Page Valley who help save lives and homes, and we can't say a thank you enough from us and the community as a whole. We also want to say thanks to Eleanor Arrington for her work behind the camera in today's special episode. If you enjoyed today's show, hit that like button and also subscribe to our YouTube channel at Page Valley News. And as always, make sure you go by the Page County Animal Shelter and help our furry friends find a forever home. Until next week, I'm Randy Arrington saying, enjoy that Page Valley living.